Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about PSP emulation with arguably the best PSP emulator out there, PPSSPP. Now on the website it says version 1.18.1, but version 1.19 seems to be just around the corner. So in this new version, which has yet to be released at the time of filming, there's going to be bug fixes, rendering fixes, audio improvements, performance improvements, new features, and even more. It's going to be a pretty big release. There's improvements for a bunch of games like Jak and Daxter, Midnight Club LA, Wipeout, Siphon Filter, Persona 1 and 2, and even more. It now allows disabling HLE on a per module basis, additional module loading improvements, more precise sleep function in Windows, improvements to RISC-V support, and now there's touch gliding support that's been added for controls. And on top of that, for controllers, and I think this is amazing, it'll allow simultaneous D-input and X-input inputs. And on top of that, multiplayer has been improved, the UI has been improved, and even more. This is going to be a really big update. I don't have a timeline on it just yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be around the corner. And speaking about new releases, next up we're talking about a brand new NES emulator called NetNES. And this is written in C# and just got its very first release. The developer behind this one says it's not perfect, but it can play most NES games fine. And they wrote the source code in a way where anyone can understand it, no matter their knowledge of low-level hardware or even code, so anyone can study and experiment with it. And that's interesting. Maybe this is a great one to check out if you're interested in development and emulators. And if you are interested in this and wanted to learn more about it, like everything we talk about, links are in the description below right at the bottom. I don't hide my sources. And speaking about open source stuff, next up we're talking about ROMM or ROMM or subscribe to Mr. Sujano depending on how you wanted to interpret that. Anyways, here, this is a beautiful, powerful, self-hosted ROM manager and just got a brand new update. So at the time of filming, version 3.10.0 is the latest update. And I'll say be careful with this one if you are updating, because they say they've discovered a bug in this version with partial metadata scans that may overwrite the cover image for games already in your library. At this time, we'd recommend not enabling retro achievements and not running partial metadata scans. And interestingly, retro achievements seems to be the big part about this update. They say your achievements right in the app. Integrating with the RA API will allow you to view the achievements you've earned for games played on other devices. And earning achievements in ROMM with Emulator.js is not supported. I'm assuming at this point in time there's going to be another revision on this because of this pretty big bug. Now, it's worth noting that retro achievements are not the only part about this update. There's quite a bit here. They're trying to make the app more accessible, and there's some nice quality of life additions like show playable games filter, recover password option, platform grouping option, sorting games by file size, and additional optional 3D tilt effects. Now, I don't know about you, but overall I would say that ROMM is a pretty cool initiative, especially for those who have multiple devices out there. And speaking about online stuff, next up we're talking about Sega Saturn emulation with Yaba Sanshiro. And Yaba Sanshiro has just released version 1.17.6. And leaderboards for Sega Rally are now live. Now, at the time of filming, there's only 4 people on the leaderboard, so I guess if you like racing games, you're a fan of the Sega Saturn, and you can compete, well, maybe you can take the top spot. Who knows? Now, if going fast isn't your thing, maybe going slow is, unless someone throws this thing really fast. Next up here, we're talking about Nvidia and a bit of a whoopsie, maybe a joke on their website that seemed to make it out to the public. Nvidia's official website had the GeForce RTX 4040 Brick Edition listed. And as you can guess, it was an actual brick. Now, fun fact about this one, and maybe an unfortunate coincidence, they listed this thing at having 8 gigs of RAM, which is the exact same as the often criticized 5060. I don't know if that was just an interesting mix-up or if that was intentional. Anyways, here it was on the website listed for $0, unable to buy, listed as out of stock, and I think has since been taken down. I don't know here. Let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. Would you be interested in a 4040 8GB brick edition? I mean, it seems to be competing with the 5060 8GB not brick edition, but arguably a brick anyways. This is super unfortunate, I think, for Nvidia, just for comparison reasons. But either way here, I love when this stuff happens. And speaking about bricks, next up we're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2. And not just the Switch 2 before the official launch date of the Switch 2 where it wouldn't work without the day one patch. We're talking about modding the Switch 2. And it's being reported here that the Switch 2 is super easy to brick, sensing the slightest voltage change or anything like that will result in boot loops. Now, for full transparency, I don't know how much of this article is factual and true and how much of it is rumor and speculation and hearsay. We're going to have to wait and see on this one because the Switch 2 is so fresh, but I'm very curious to see what happens when people actually start to try modding it. But in all honesty, I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo did take extra measures to make sure the Switch 2 wasn't hackable, or at least not easily hackable or moddable. And I'm curious to know if the game key cards were a step against piracy as well. We'll have to wait and see on that as well. Anyways, here at this point in time, I haven't seen anyone mod the Switch 2 yet, but I have seen people take it apart. Pro Modding has an almost 17-minute long video taking apart the Switch 2. It's up on YouTube and I recommend checking it out. And like everything we talk about, links are in the description below right at the bottom. And this one is... It's interesting. I don't know if the Switch 2 is operable after taking it apart like this. I would assume so. But anyways, if you wanted to see stuff up close under a microscope in the chipset, Pro Modding has you covered in this video. And continuing to talk about the Switch 2, next up, this is more of just a rumor, but seems to be a lot of smoke around it, and where there's smoke, sometimes there's fire. Anyways, here it's for a Ring Fit Adventure successor. And someone has noticed that there's been some patents filed that may indicate that a successor for Ring Fit Adventure is in development. Now, I've got no idea if this is true or not, but I would assume that Nintendo would be working on a Ring Fit Adventure successor given its overall success and popularity. And Nintendo Patents Watch says, taken together, it strongly suggests that a new fitness game and accessory are in development. Although the deferment of design registration can last up to 30 months, companies usually register product designs closer to the reveals. I suspect we'll hear more about it within a year. Let me know your thoughts about that one. Next up, we're going back one generation and talking about the Nintendo Switch and switching to emulation. We're talking about Nintendo Switch emulation on Android with Kenji NX. And Kenji NX Android version 2.0.4 just dropped. As for what's new with this update, they say there are some performance improvements. For example, JIT cache eviction fixes out-of-memory errors with some games. And low-power PPTC, it's a port from the desktop version and uses 1/3 of the cores to load PPTC. And also, the APK file size has been reduced by 8.5%. And speaking about performance, next up here, we're talking about something that is, it's very interesting, but understand the context, and we'll get to that in just a second. But anyways, it's a series of tweets comparing the Snapdragon 8 Elite versus the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme. And it seems the Snapdragon 8 Elite comes out on top. So in this comparison, they're using the Snapdragon 8 Elite found in the Red Magic 10 Pro versus the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme found in the Asus ROG Ally, and those are the two devices they're comparing. And it seems here the Snapdragon 8 Elite is outperforming the Z1 Extreme. And interestingly as well, they say here x86 emulators on Android, like for Snapdragon 8 Elite, have 50% performance loss and -7 FPS from screen record. And that's interesting also because the Snapdragon 8 Elite doesn't have turnip drivers. For comparison, they've got a few different devices running that Snapdragon 8 Elite versus the Asus ROG Ally with that AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme. Now, I don't know if it's a 50% performance loss, but they are saying here x86 emulators on Android, like for Snapdragon 8 Elite, have around a 50% performance loss and around a 7 FPS loss from screen record. I will say there will be losses from screen record and from emulators. I don't know if these are the exact numbers, though. I guess through their testing, they found that out. On top of that, it's worth noting here that the Snapdragon 8 Elite doesn't have custom Mesa turnip drivers yet. So anyways, for the games that were tested, Control was tested first at 720p low graphics, and both the Snapdragon 8 Elite and the Z1 Extreme ran at 80 FPS, although the Snapdragon 8 Elite had a slightly higher resolution. Looking at Mad Max here, the Snapdragon 8 Elite at 1080p high was at 60 frames per second. The Z1 Extreme was at 70 with 44 watts being consumed, and 37 FPS with 25 watts consumed. Turned down to 1080p graphics high at 60 frames per second, the Snapdragon 8 Elite was only using 6 watts. For The Witcher 3 at 720p with a little bit higher resolution here for the Snapdragon was running at 44 FPS with 15 watts being drawn, with the Z1 Extreme running at 47 FPS using 25 watts. Now for the context, and trying not to open too big of a can of worms here, but this is important. Both chips are running completely different architectures, ARM versus x86 64. And also the Snapdragon is emulating or translating Windows. It's not running Windows natively on this one. And also compatibility will play a big factor. You can say the Snapdragon 8 outperforms the Z1 Extreme all day, every day. However, that's not necessarily the case across the board because not everything will work on that Snapdragon 8 Elite. Compatibility is huge. I would argue here that these results are kind of cherry-picked, although I'm not knocking the Snapdragon 8 Elite. I would say overall it's extremely impressive. And given the fact that these things are not natively running on Android, I think that is absolutely huge and a very bright future for the Snapdragon. I would say it's also a very bright future for ARM in general. But at this point in time, ARM overall compatibility is just not there yet. But let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. What do you feel about the overall comparison here between ARM and x86 64, specifically these two chips? And what do you think about the future of ARM? And if ARM compatibility was there, would you be interested in using ARM over x86 64? And speaking about comparing, next up we're comparing bots for what they're supposed to be doing versus what they're actually doing. Interestingly, in yesterday's video, we talked about Dolphin's huge update, and they had a write-up, and in that write-up, they talked about AI bots and scraping, and that stuff causing issues for their wiki pages and their websites, which interestingly, the scrapers were ignoring the standard protocols that they were supposed to follow. Well, anyways here, it's being reported that Reddit is suing Anthropic, alleging its bots are accessing Reddit more than 100,000 times since last July. Meanwhile, Anthropic had previously claimed to have stopped crawling Reddit in May of 2024. I recommend giving the article on The Verge a read because there's a lot of very interesting information in here. Apparently, Anthropic did not immediately provide a comment. They're probably going to have to review things on their side here. But this is a lawsuit, and this could be pretty big. I mean, check out this paragraph here. Ben Lee, Reddit's chief legal officer, said in an emailed statement to The Verge that Anthropic's commercial exploitation of Reddit's content could be worth billions of dollars. We're going to have to wait and see as to how this lawsuit unfolds, and I'm wondering here if this statement will hold true and will damage the overall reputation of Anthropic. Because here is the statement. Late-blooming artificial intelligence AI company that bills itself as the white knight of the AI industry is anything but. Let me know your thoughts about that. Next up, we're talking about Sony's State of Play, which occurred yesterday, and a lot of interesting things were unveiled during it. One of those was Final Fantasy Tactics: The Avalis Chronicles. Now, this is an enhanced version of the game headed to PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, but not just PlayStation. Also Nintendo Switch, Switch 2, Xbox Series S and X, and PC via Steam. It is releasing on September 30th. Also unveiled during the State of Play was the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, and I find this collection amazing for a number of reasons. 1, it's going to have rollback netcode. 2, it includes Mortal Kombat 1 through 4, including a few different things here. Let's go through everything. So Mortal Kombat, Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, Mortal Kombat 4, Mortal Kombat Advance and Deadly Alliance and Tournament Edition. And it will include both the console, the arcade, and the handheld versions. Not joking here. Arcade, SNES, Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Gear. 32X where it applies, Game Boy Advance where it applies, and even more. This is, not even more, that is basically everything. But anyways here, I think this is amazing. But let me know your thoughts about this one. There's going to be an interactive documentary as well, and there's quite a bit packed into this. I would say this is one game to kind of rule them all for Mortal Kombat, unless you prefer the newer versions of Mortal Kombat. If you like the classic versions of Mortal Kombat, I would say this is one game to kind of rule them all. Unfortunately, I don't know the release date just yet. They just say sometime in 2025, but fortunately, I don't think it's a PlayStation exclusive. From my understanding, it will be hitting other consoles as well as PC. Now, if you're a fan of fighting games but wanted something exclusive, well, Sony may have you covered here. So this is called Project Defiant. It's a brand new arcade stick that Sony is developing. From my understanding, it will be moddable. You can change the restrictor gates in the joystick here. I don't know if you can replace the joystick altogether. I don't know if the buttons are replaceable. Apparently they will be mechanical buttons. It will be a wireless stick, and I think it looks pretty good. It will have a touchpad. Unfortunately, I don't know the release date or the price on this one or how good that wireless is going to be. I'm assuming it's going to be fairly decent. We'll have to wait and see, but let me know your thoughts about this fight stick. Now, on top of all of that, there are even more game announcements at the State of Play. For example, Bloodstained: The Scarlet Engagement. There was 007 First Light, which we had talked about in a previous video. Neo 3 was announced. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater gameplay was showcased. Silent Hill F got a release date of September 23rd. Capcom's Pragmata was re-announced with a launch date of 2026. And this was unveiled as a PlayStation exclusive here, Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, which looks pretty good. So this is a 4v4 fighting game, and I would say the State of Play was pretty big, but arguably overshadowed with the upcoming launch and subsequent launch of the Switch 2. Let me know your thoughts about the State of Play. And last up here, we're talking about the PSP Go spiritual successor, the Anbernic RG Slide. Now, we had talked about this device the other day when it was unveiled, and now we've got even more information about this unit. The screen on this is 1280 by 960, and if you're interested to learn more about it, Anbernic has put out a new video. And you can play in portrait mode or landscape mode. It seems to be running Android, and they're saying here it'll pretty much run everything up to and including the Nintendo Wii. Let me know your thoughts about the Anbernic RG Slide in the comments below. Is this of interest? Is a PSP Go successor something that you think is pretty cool or not? Taking a look at some of the comments on that video, and this person says, relax guys, don't you know Anbernic? They're going to release 4 more models. Slide without analog, slide with analog 16 by 9, slide without analog 16 by 9, and slide with H700. Am I the only one who thinks this thing is too big for a PSP Go? And someone else says, for real Anbernic, you'll revive the PSP Go and make it 4x3. And someone replies to that and says, leaves room for improvement. This is dope. It should be an improvement of the Xperia Play or PSP Go from 2009. That is indeed a bit weird. So it seems comments are kind of all over the place, but the overall sentiment is that Anbernic is probably going to be releasing more versions of this. And last up here is kind of a bonus piece of news. We're talking about Deltarune. Now, we talked about Deltarune yesterday because it launched yesterday. Anyways, it seems the game has been very well received. Over on Steam, it's got an overwhelmingly positive review score, which I would say is amazing. I mean, it's the highest review score you can get, and it's got over 10,000 reviews. And taking a look over on SteamDB, and Deltarune has cracked the top 10. It's currently sitting in 10th place for most popular games in the last 24 hours. And that is for all of Steam. That is a pretty big achievement, at least in my opinion. If you've played Deltarune, let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. It was a huge day for news. Let me know your thoughts about anything we talked about in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.